Greetings. Welcome to episode 22 of the Revolutionary Social Work podcast. This is another one of our social work outside of the status quo series, and another one that was recorded at the NASW National Conference in Chicago.
Yeah, and this one, our guest was Rev Love. Alicia wasn't able to be there. She was here in Hawaii holding the fort down with the family. But me and MT tried to do the best that we could in her place. And like I said, our guest was Rev Love. And one of the favorite things about Rev Love for me is the mutual connection to Dr. Mutulu Shakur. And we talk about it a lot in the episode, so I won't get into too much detail. But Dr. Mutulu Shakur was a friend of mine. And it makes me think of the famous scene from, if you ever seen the Western film Tombstone, with Val Kilmer playing Doc Holliday. There's a scene towards the end where Doc Holliday is really sick, but he's out there supporting his friend, Wyatt Earp. And one of the other guys, one of their other friends, their comrades, says to him, Wyatt, what the hell are you doing out here? You sick as hell. Like, what are you doing out here? You shouldn't be out here. And he says, Wyatt Earp is my friend. And the guy says, well, hell, I got lots of friends. And Doc Holliday replies, well, I don't. And I think that kind of epitomizes me. I always have a lot of connections. I'm a unique person, and it takes a lot to be friends with someone like me, especially over time. And when I do make a deep friendship like I did with Dr. Mutulu Shakur, it means a lot to me, and it comes from the heart. And on the other side, I've tried to advocate for Dr. Mutulu Shakur and political prisoners. And the positive side of it is that I get to meet people like Rev Love, who, you know, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of heart to be in that position and to stand up for something that's so far outside of the status quo. And on the negative side of it is I've tried to get other people in social work to care about political prisoners, and in specific, Dr. Mutulu Shakur before he left us. It's just a dead roadblock. I get basically zero interaction. It's like the biggest conversation stopper in the world. Matter of fact, folks don't even acknowledge it. They just move on and don't even acknowledge that I said anything or if I wrote an email or something. So my point here is I have much respect for Rev Love and anybody else that's willing to step up and stand up for political prisoners. And in specific, Dr. Mutulu Shakur. Any friend of the doc is a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Yeah, and Rev Love has been on our podcast before. We've had an episode with her, and I was lucky to be in that episode there. My spirit just feels good in her presence. But just to introduce her, she is a yogi and a musician. So she founded Yoga for Activists, and she also co-founded One Nation Sound, which is like a collective of musicians, sound healers, DJs. And so her work is so impactful because it blends the spiritual practices with social justice. And she's such a good demonstration of one of our core values, which is social work outside of the profession. As Ace said, she's worked with political prisoners. Dr. Mutulu Shakur was one of her mentors. And she also provides healing programs within those carceral spaces. So her work is incredible. And it's, like I said, a huge reflection of that value where she's demonstrating revolutionary social work values without being a formal social worker.
Yeah, absolutely. Most definitely. And you might have seen our newest family member back there. There he is. His name is Tough Gong, a.k.a. Tuffy. Newest member of the family. He's been here for about a week. But anyways, another thing that I really love about Rev Love is she has an understanding that that I feel like is missing in a lot of spaces, and that is that revolution, activism, resistance, it starts with the self. If we want to revolutionize the world, we want to revolutionize the system, all of that, we have to revolutionize ourselves first. And she recognizes that, you know, she takes care of herself and the community, practicing yoga, sound healing, things like that, which we talk about in the episode. She recognized that, how important it is for us to heal ourselves. You know, we can't go around marching in the streets if we have a big hole in our heart. You know what I'm saying? We've got to figure out a way to fill that up and become whole. And then we can actually collectively, you know, make the big changes within the system, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And that's a great part of this episode that you'll get into. And it just reminded me, one thing I wanted to mention was we oftentimes walk around the world, live life thinking that we're these human beings, and we occasionally have these spiritual experiences. But I think a lot of the work that Rev Love does and with sound healing shows that we're actually spiritual beings having this human experience. So it's very important to connect on that spiritual level. But yeah, like I said, I wasn't at the conference, unfortunately, didn't get to be a part of this episode directly, but how was it for you?
Well, I say it was incredible talking to Rev Love and connecting. We use that word connection. It was actually a very disconnected atmosphere because we were at the conference. So there's a lot of distractions, first of all. But that second day of recording, which this was one of them, the internet was absolutely terrible down there in the whatever it is, the exhibition hall. And half the time that we were talking to Rev Love, it froze up. And so you might see me and MT kind of looking like what's going on, but it's just because it kept freezing up. But luckily it records locally, so we were able to preserve the entire episode. It's just a little more disconnected than I would have liked. So we're gonna have to get in there with Rev Love some other time for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, enjoy, everybody. Thank
Peace.
you.
Hey, listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss. How we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. We're still here live in Chicago at the NASW National Conference. I'm here with MT, and we're very happy and privileged to be joined by Rev Love, coming from New York.
Yeah, Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York. That's what's up. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. You and I have some great conversations. We have a lot of commonalities. So I'm just really happy to be here and chop it up with you a little.
Yeah, same here. I had a absolute blast talking to you last time, and I felt like there were so many things we could have touched on a deeper level. The first thing I just wanted to say is that Rev Love epitomizes the 10th value of revolutionary social work, which is practicing social work outside the official profession. It's something that we try to emphasize and highlight. So I appreciate everything that you do, and we'll talk a lot about that. But I thought we could start with one of our most common connections, which is the doc, Dr. Mutulu Shakur. He helped me out back in the days, like actually just about 10 years ago exactly. I wrote him and he helped me out with a school project when I was in grad school for my MSW, and we stayed in contact, became good friends after that. And I know you've been friends with him for a while too, yeah?
Yeah, I first wrote him almost 20 years ago. And, I want to say we became friends right away, or comrades, or mentor-mentee right away. But I think everybody felt that way about Doc. He's one of those personalities, one of those historical figures at this point that really embodies revolutionary love. And anybody that he came into contact with felt that revolutionary love, like just that pure love for the people. And that's always like my greatest takeaway of all the many lessons that I learned from him, is just like his love for the people is really like that Che Guevara quote, like true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love,
Yeah, and to be honest with you, that's exactly how I feel about my relationship with him. And when you reach out and you do something like that, you always, or I shouldn't say you always, but I had an anxiety about how I might be received. And I can only say that it was nothing but absolutely love and kindness. And even when he would call me later on, he would never even talk about himself and all the things that he was going through and, the struggles that he was having. He'd want to talk to me about me and my family and show us love and care in such a way. And everybody that I've talked to that knows him says the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's just it. I had like the same anxiety. So, Doc was actually the first political prisoner that I ever wrote. And so same thing. I was like, oh my gosh, what do I say? Like, is he going to, judge me for being a Canadian woman? Like, or, is he going to even care to hear from me? And it was so the opposite. It was so all those anxieties were created in my own head. And I actually got to share at one of his life celebrations, the life celebration for him in New York after he passed. And I just shared like kind of what you said. Despite his circumstances, he was always so genuinely caring about how I was doing, what was going on in my life. And I have multiple memories of him coaching me through life problems and issues, giving me advice, giving me, like, consoling me, you know, and I'm just like, that is an extraordinary human being. Like, you're in the depths of hell, right? The US prison system, and you are consoling me on the outside with all my privileges of freedom. So, extraordinary human being.
Yeah, and doing all that as well with how poorly he had been treated, various things. I think when I first met him, he was supposed to have a mandatory release. And, you know, they pushed back on that for some dumb reason, like he was writing his letters with stiff resistance at the end, things like that.
Yeah, that's exactly, that was it, stiff resistance. Like, it could be a whole letter. It's just that piece out was stiff resistance, Mutulu, and that was their basis for not granting his parole.
And like you said, he epitomized what we call revolutionary love, because it wasn't about all the division. That's never what it was about. It was about love and connection. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. The love of the people, like, that's the only reason we do any of this, right?
So with, you know, and I guess a little background, if anybody's tuning in that's not familiar, Dr. Mutulu Shakur, member of the Black Liberation Army, Tupac Shakur's stepfather, was married to Afeni Shakur for a little while, spent 40 plus years in prison and was released and transitioned on shortly afterward. How do we remember him now, or how can we, you know, I guess honor his legacy and push it forward, because we're in such a different world now than, you know, back when the Black Liberation Army was in action.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of ask myself that on a daily basis, to be honest. One thing that Mutulu always told me is we have to use all tools available to us. So if yoga or meditation are tools to you that can aid in the liberation of the people, then you use that tool. If it's armed guerrilla warfare, that's your tool. If your tool is music, I mean, definitely his legacy lives on through music because of his connection with Tupac and so many young artists that he mentored and that would come to him. But, you know, I guess it's just in our daily movements, in however we move. From the simplest thing, you know, I always often wear a Mutulu pin, like on my jacket or my sweater. And the amount of people that just stop me in the streets or on the train that are like, yo, Mutulu Shakur, yeah, and just like get into conversations. Yeah, so I think, like I said, I'm kind of asking myself that every day, how I can honor his legacy just a little bit more. You know, I try to do it through all the tools that I can, just like he told me to do. Yeah.
If you want to know more about Dr. Mutulu Shakur, I suggest you look up the film Dope is Death, right? The film, and the doc was into acupuncture to heal to work with folks with addiction problems and all sorts of things.
Yeah, of course.
So you are very interesting because
I think those
you
things
practice
are
sound healing, yoga, and you tie it to activism, and those kind of things aren't what we always hear connected.
Yoga,
when we
and a lot of like
think of
Eastern
activism.
healing
You mind talking about that
practices
just
in
a little
general.
bit?
I always say, like, there's no spiritual awakening that doesn't involve more compassion for humanity. So if you're practicing yoga and not taking that off of the mat, or like you think that you're spiritually enlightened, but you don't give back to the community or try to aid in the liberation of all beings everywhere, then you're kind of missing out. It's just like a physical practice then, right? Like yoga is this way of life. Just like our revolutionary practices are a way of life, yoga is a way of life too that has to extend off the mat. If your yoga is just when you go to the studio and you do some sun salutations and then that's it, that's not yoga. That's just a workout. So I try to always bring that into every class that I teach, just to let folks know, like, this is a philosophy, a way of life. Some might call it a religion that involves a lot more than just what we're doing right here in this studio at this moment.
Yeah, and it also goes to, you know, when you're thinking about activism, we're thinking about changing the system and all this stuff, but those are daunting tasks. We were talking about this earlier.
Jerome, go ahead.
Whereas, you know, like in revolutionary social work, we're looking at, you know, internal change, personal transformation is a prerequisite to those things truly happening. You got any thoughts on that?
No, I'm just in complete agreement. No, go ahead. I'm just in complete agreement, you know, that any spiritual work, any practice, if it's removed from its purpose, if it's removed from the mindfulness and the intention of it, then it's just a mechanism, you know, and if you're using the body, then it's a physical mechanism of exercise. But if we empower it with that intention and with that,
yeah, indeed, like
conscious,
That's just it, because
like attunement of that tool.
another thing that
Then
I
we
say in
have like
class often is
spiritual
like,
development
if
and
even people
explosion
that
and
don't
change and
consciously
transformation.
come
So
to a yoga
yeah, I'm
class
just in
for
agreement and
that
alignment, just sitting over
spiritual
here like,
awakening, that
yeah, that's
has
good.
to
That's
lead to
like
some kind
tasting
of
good soup.
revolution. Like I said, a spiritual awakening has to lead to more compassion for all the other humans and for the planet and all the beings everywhere, right? Even if they're not there because they consciously are aware of that, I always say, like, if you were just here for a workout, you would have just gone to the gym. So there's something in your spirit, in your subconscious, that knows that this is more than just stretching and holding postures.
It makes me think of John Africa, the leader of the Move organization back in the day, and he would talk about revolution as, your heart needs to revolutionize or you'll die. Your lungs need to constantly be revolutionizing or you'll die. But right in
Yeah,
our
and I
modern
think we're at
world,
this
I
time
keep
now
talking about
where
the
the
captivated mind. We get in this
intersectionality of
state of
all
like the
of these
opposite of
things in
revolution, where
society
we're
is
just constantly captivated
becoming
and we're not
so
continued
obvious. Like, we know now that
either forcing or accepting
revolution
that continuous
involves
change. You know what I mean?
healthcare, involves growing our own food. It's not just about like overthrowing the police system. All these things are interconnected for a true change in society to occur. So
That's room.
No, I'm just in an alignment. Yeah, I think what we're really harping on is like revolution is a personal commitment, and there's accountability to it, and there's an intentional direction, like the direction matters, like where you point the tool of whether it's a movement asana or whether it's sound and music. Like sound and music can totally be as toxic as a bad relationship if it's directed and pointed, if that tool, if that method is pointed in a direction that's leading toward something destructive. But when it is led or when it is pioneered or, spearheaded toward a creative, a holistic, evolutionary principle, or at least desire, like just want something to be nicer and more creative and more holistic, I think it functions really well, and like you said, it intimately attunes you to the potential of it providing that spiritual wholeness, that evolution within you. Like you can go into a yoga class and it could be just an exercise, but if there's just a little bit of narrative of direction that tool could be used for something more, then it sparks that, and then that awareness becomes like, almost immediate, at least enough to shift the focus to where it becomes something healthy. And as you being a leader and us being as leaders within using those systems, I find it, really to your point of revolutionary social work, it starts with us. We have to articulate that and we have to guide that process, and we have to like say, hey, you know what? Here's a narrative that you can add on to your desire of physical workout and exercise. Guess what? We can also work out your spirit. We can also work out your emotions. We can also work out some of that thinking, And that's what it did for me. Like when I started a real asana practice, it was less, for my spiritual development. I had all these cultural practices for that. But man, the mental clarity to be able to move my thoughts around, to command my thoughts, to use that tool to direct the part of my health balance in a way that brought me into that spiritual space. Like in our indigenous thought, spirituality is the collective and holistic nature of us being human. It is the intellectual, the emotional, and the physical all together. When they're all in unity, that's a spiritual experience. And I find like these tools and these mechanisms that we use just help us attune to that like
yes, that's so
collective
beautiful what you
consciousness
just
of
said.
who we are. So I really enjoy how you guys are articulating the necessity for the awareness of how we're directing that tool and using it in its potential.
Yeah.
Well, I see we do have some people in the audience. So if you have anything you want to contribute, any questions, or you want to jump on and chat with
Well,
us
yeah,
in some
sound baths
dialogue,
have
feel free to
become
do
like
so.
pretty popular these days.
So you also are into sound healing, right?
And
Am I
people
saying that right?
think
Sound
of,
healing?
just the crystal sound
Can you
bowls that
tell us about it?
you
I think
drag
there's a lot of
around
folks that
and
don't
they,
even have any idea of what that means.
but anything can be sound healing, like the voice sound healing, any instruments can be sound healing. There's actually a ancient yoga practice called Nada Yoga, which is the yoga of deep listening and sound. And so I love to use the term nada yoga when I offer sound baths, sound healings, because it makes it a practice. Because sound baths have become so popular, it waters down like the quality and the depth of what we can actually experience. And so when we treat it like a practice, it just becomes a little more important. Like Jerome was saying, then we have like this energy that we can direct instead of just kind of mindlessly laying there and listening to these interesting sounds. You can set your intention to it. You can build your deep listening skills. There are hospitals in California that are now using sound to break up tumors. And they're showing, like with all their science, with the computers, with all their technology that is not really my thing, when they put the instruments, whether it's like a Tibetan bowl or whatever instruments that they're using on a daily basis, I don't know how many times they do it a day, on the areas where people are affected, it's showing in the computer system the tumor, the mass is breaking up. And so that means that sound has the ability to move matter. Like, it doesn't just make you feel relaxed and calm. It does that. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That's amazing. We all need to be a little more calm and relaxed in these days. But it actually can move physical matter. So to me, that's like, we're just learning this. Of course, like ancient Egyptian society knew this, ancient Tibetan society knew this. We're remembering now with all of our new science to prove what the ancients had already known. To me, it's like fascinating. And I do offer sound baths, sound healing, but I have so much more to learn about it because it's like, it's just such a deep topic.
Yeah, and more and more research is coming out too. How important our time is when we're in the womb before we even officially come into this world. And you think about the difference of, a parent that some parents do rituals and other things like that, but some use music and sound versus if you were in the womb and you're hearing arguments from your parents, for example. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really love that you said it was a practice. In the spiritual development world, when I see sound baths and all of that, is very much ritualized as a one-time shot, right? Like you're supposed to come and get this cleansing from a sound bath, and now you're clean, and now there's no more work, and you just kind of come get the experience, and then you're supposed to be transformed from this like one-off exchange. But when it is a practice, which it comes from, right? The consistency is there. We definitely
Dr.
see where
Masaru
like
Emoto, I was literally just
spiritual
remembering him up.
principles of frequency and vibration creating our reality really are starting to meet head in head with the scientific explanation of that, right? Like from the water experiments of what's his name, Matsuomo, where yeah, right. Like where we're seeing where frequency actually shapes physical reality, right? And so, of course, if you can change the tone of frequency of not just like sound, right, but frequency as in how frequently something happens in your life, how much repetition, right? Like I'm an African-based person, so rhythm is so important. Being able to get the consistency of that pattern provides the spacing for the melody and the words and the meaning to be imbued so that we can direct all of that energy, and also so that we can get the body to move in regulation and in concert with that meaning and intention. So it being like labeled for as a practice and you offering it as a practice, to me is so enriching because people need to know that it's a tool, not like a magical trick, but it's an actual technology for you to bring balance back into your world and to attune yourself, like you said. And I think that is such a beautiful thing to highlight as a practitioner. Is like, this is a practice, because as practitioners, it is our practice. It's like every day, anytime there's some kind of misalignment or misattunement, we're knocking in to get in that frequency, that vibrational attunement so that we can show up the way we need to. So I really enjoy that you emphasize the necessity for, or even just the opportunity to use it as a tool versus a one-off magical transfer
and not participating just because they are trying to
I really love
cool.
that you articulated and emphasized that in your offer.
Kind of touches on that, like, because I said it is a practice. So first of all, like if we honor if we honor that we're here for a practice, because sound is frequency, so it's working with our intention. So I think it's really about your intention. It's great to be able to say where these practices came from if we know that history. Some people don't know that history, but sound is for everybody ultimately, but it's really about the intention. So even if you are attending a sound bath that seems like it's just happening because it's trendy or cool, I think your intention is going to overpower any of that. Like your intention, even if you don't particularly vibe with the sound practitioner, your intention is going to make that frequency work with you how the sound needs to in that time. So that's another thing, like kind of side note, that I love about sound so much, is that it's really not about me. Like I'm just banging these instruments, blowing a flute, whatever it is, but the sound is beyond me. The sound is doing whatever it needs to do for the people that are in the space. And that's not like me doing that work. You know, that is the sound frequency that is a super intelligent frequency. I don't know if that answered Jesse's question.
I got a question for you. In your own like physical experience, because so many of us, when we go to sound baths, we feel it physically, right? Like there's that physical alertness that changes. What are some of the things that you've learned being a presenter and being someone that provides that space for others? Like you're filtering those experiences, you're experiencing parts of those things with them. What are some things that you've learned about,
well, yeah, like I was saying earlier,
the physical representation
now
of vibration in the body and how that shifts like our mindset, our emotions, or
so
what is the
that's telling
connective
us that it can
tissue
move
in your own
emotional
experience
matter,
to
energetic
frequency,
matter.
vibration, and healing?
And this is the other thing about it becoming so trendy and people thinking, and like, God bless, everybody can do what they want, you know what I mean? But people thinking that all they have to do is just show up and play a couple bowls and that's cool. That's all they have to do. I've experienced people with like PTSD have breakdowns in sound baths. Like if I wasn't trained to deal with that, I would have freaked out. You know, I have people come up sometimes afterwards and like they're crying because it unlocked some memory from childhood, or like tell me that they felt like they were in the womb, like all kinds of things. So that's where my training as a yoga instructor and as a trauma-informed yoga instructor, that is like the only thing that has helped me get through those times. So I don't want to like scare people off, of course. Amazing experiences happen in sound baths where people feel things unlocking, and it's a freeing and beautiful experience. But sometimes people have to deal with some shit, you know? And if the practitioner doesn't know how to hold that space for them, it can be like a bad trip in a way. And then they just walk back out into society and not know how to integrate the experience they had, which just like reopens their trauma all over again. That's not cool, you know?
We were having a conversation with someone I think we want to have on later, and that was a big conversation within the reversionization of traditional indigenous practices in the United States. We're taking indigenous practices and making them versions of themselves that are applicable for the American experience, for the US experience, because a lot of us are in a different environment and situation. But to have the integrity of leadership, of guidance, like if you're going to be a guidance counselor, right, through this medium of sound or yoga or even conversation, right, there is a necessity to maintain a certain level of expertise in navigating the things that are flowing through that process, you know. And I think even our conversation earlier about like dissenting social work and just looking at our processes and our practices in a new light so that we can make those adjustments to maintain integrity and the capacity to move the things that we're coming up against. Because a lot of times we're dealing with the unknown, right? Like you get into the sound bath and then it's triggered and you have to like, there's no like direct navigational like system that says, hey, if somebody trips out in the middle of a sound bath, you know, and they get to this place and this trauma is triggered, this is how to do it. It is one that like elders used to help educate, being in practice, being in community around that implementing that tool, and having other people that have like just longevity, you know, consistency with it, that are saying, oh, you know, I notice these things, and being able to share. I think you representing the integrity of that responsibility is really important in that conversation is one that if we had more of it in those like smaller niche communities, I think we would get like really like empowered practices as well, you know, because yeah, it's nice when you trust your practitioner. And if you know you can trust them, you're also allowed to, like my therapist, man, it took me so long to find me a good, like, talk therapy person. But once I found my guy, oh man, like we can go
Yeah, I mean, of course,
deep.
like
And I
you're
feel the
there
availability
to hold a
and
space
the
for
agency to
folks,
step into that
obviously.
space.
And
So I
if they
think
don't
like
feel
you,
safe with the
again,
practitioner,
emphasizing the
they're not
integrity
going to
of
have
that
the best experience that
responsibility
they could
is
have.
paramount and also
That's what
really
it's all about,
refreshing.
right?
I want to get to there's a good couple comments in the chat, but before that, I want to provide a little counterbalance to think about. So I was in during the pandemic. I was in Honolulu. I had 3 little kids, and the law was that you during the pandemic you couldn't go outside. Remember, you could walk, traverse to the beach, but you weren't allowed to hang out in the park. You weren't allowed to do anything. So we were in this high-rise apartment, and they was doing drilling above us. And so I had 3 little kids, and it was affecting them, the construction, and it drove me fucking crazy. And I was ready to kill somebody, to be honest with you. Like I swear, like it was hard. And I'm having flashbacks of that right now here in this construction, whatever they're doing over here, going through my microphone into the headphones is driving me crazy.
Yeah.
So I guess my question to either of you or both of you is, what about when we don't have a therapist or when we don't have somebody, a different practitioner helping us, and because a lot of things are about environment, right? A lot of people live in
we are all
environments
we
that
all have a voice.
they can't control the noise
Some
around
folks
them,
don't have a voice, but they
noise
can still
pollution,
create
things like that.
vibrations.
So what kind of tools can we use in
a
those
lot of times people
situations?
are like, well, I'm not a singer. You can chant Om. Like Om is a sound healing. Mantras, prayer, like Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is vibrations that are healing. You can do that yourself. That, obviously, breath work, you can do that yourself. Meditation, you can do yourself. I understand sometimes we're in situations that it will be challenging to do those things. I live in New York City. I always tell people that, like, if you can get into a nice meditation in New York City, you are a pretty advanced practitioner, because it's always chaotic out in the streets here. Yeah, it can be a challenge sometimes, but we do have those tools. Like, those are just God-given tools to breathe, to chant, make sound, to stretch our bodies, to close our eyes and focus inward. Yeah, Jerome, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, to piggyback off of your emphasis of practice, when I'm teaching any type of progressive system, anytime where people want to improve, I empower a model of power in the practice, wisdom in the work. When you look at these tools and mechanisms as a practice, every time you engage them, you empower yourself to embody the healing, to embody the transformation, or to utilize the progressive energy that you've generated, right? Just from consistency to evoke that transformation, right? So when you are by yourself and you don't have supporting community, it's really important that you do the practice so that when those times are there and you're all alone or you're in an unknown state, you have the power to engage that transformation, because that's the power of the practice, is it maintains your community with you. But if you don't have enough recognition and relationship with that process, you'll think you're by yourself, but you're there with the practice. You're there with the mechanism. You're there with the tool. You know, it's like we have the flashlight and we just forget that we've practiced enough how to turn it on and we know how to shine the light. And so when you're by yourself, you just got to be like, it's time for me to hit the button. I've been practicing hitting this button just in case my power goes out. You know, I've been practicing, like, you remember fire drills when we were young in school? Like, you would practice them so that when it came, you knew exactly what to do. So when there's a fire drill in our life, that consistent practice empowers us to know, have clarity, have wisdom, have a pathway out of that, you know, unknown space into a place of grounded awareness and empowerment. So again, like, I really think that viewing it and receiving that tool, that beautiful practice as a practice, as something that like is going to be beneficial to me in other times and spaces, I think is really important, instead of making it the transactional one time I go there, I'm healed experience. No, put that bad boy into practice. Practice intentionally connecting to a specific of feeling, of sound, of, of thinking, or even just like not doing those things and being in the present moment. That's such a great practice that helps us like navigate those things. So I really enjoyed it was really refreshing to hear, especially sound baths, right? Because I lived in Hawaii for like 20 years. That like new age wellness movement, like everybody's got some crystal balls, everybody's a yoga professor, guru. We're not even regular teachers in Hawaii. It's like we're all gurus of a certain type. And so it really being a practice and having a framework, I think gives people, it gives you the power to use it. And I think that's really key and paramount. And I really enjoyed that perspective you shared.
I think it's also when we get in these situations, it's about how can you not collapse inward into anxiety and stress and that kind of chaos. And I like how one of your responses, Rev Love, too, was breath work or coming back to the breathing, because when we get in those situations, when we are collapsing into that anxiety and stress. Almost all the time, at least for myself, I realize I'm forgetting about my breath.
Because we
Once
live
I can
in
even
this
just bring it back to just
fast
simple,
food, like social media,
in and out, take it
society,
from there. Then
and everybody
you have an
wants
opportunity, a
immediate
window to
change,
find
and
peace.
like not just a little change. People just want like an immediate, massive change in their lives, But meditating one time is not gonna bring that. Maybe some people have like Kundalini awakenings the first time they meditate, maybe, but meditate for 10 days straight and then see how you feel. Like this is not just like an ayahuasca journey, right? This can bring us to the awakening that an ayahuasca journey could bring us to, but it requires that consistent practice. And like you said, to be able to use it especially when the time is needed. And that's one thing that you, Ace, and I were talking about, like when the time is needed, like when you're confronted with something in life that you need to activate those tools that you have gained from your practice. That is the point.
Well, should we honor the folks talking in the chat here for just a minute?
Yeah.
Let me put on my glasses so I can read. Thug Chief says, sound healing is an effective and natural way to heal the body, mind, and spirit. It can be used to treat a wide variety of conditions, both physical and mental. If you're looking for an alternative therapy to help you relax, reduce stress, or improve your overall health, sound healing may be right for you. Talk to your healthcare provider about whether sound healing is a good option for you. It says, from in the beginning,
definitely not in New York
Creator
State.
used
I
sound
don't know
to
if
form
any
greatness.
other like more progressive states
Speaking
are
to that first
offering it.
comment for a second,
I'm going to say
I didn't
probably
realize
not
that
at this point,
your healthcare
but
provider
who
could
knows?
refer you to such. Can you use insurance for sound
Oh,
healing?
you think?
Maybe we need some more organic healthcare providers. Yeah.
Well, like I've had some conversations about like alternative therapies, and being under like yoga and that like was kind of being open as like another alternative wellness therapy. So like in Hawaii, in a different state, there were some companies that had private, healthcare and stuff that would add yoga in there. So if it was termed or if it was coded, right, for the healthcare system as a yogic practice, there were some places that were starting to add that benefit. We were trying to get some other indigenous practices added in, but yoga has a great relationship in the United States in the healthcare system. Like it was kind of introduced in the United States as a healthcare initiative almost, like even with like mental health. So I think it has a greater door opening. But that is really, really interesting. Like if that would be offered, like how great would it be if sound healing was a prescription? Like, you need to be bathed. Like even that terminology, right? Like bathe in a particular frequency, like drenched and nurtured and cleansed and fortified and refreshed through sound. Like that would just be the most amazing conversation to have with my right, like my GP would just be like, hey Jerome, I know you had some lower cortisol levels or something. I think what you need is a good
I think
song.
we're like slowly
Eric,
moving
can we get
there,
some Erica
slowly.
Badu Sade mixed with a
That's a wave
Himalayan
of the
bowl for
future.
you? Like
Sorry.
that would be so dope. Like it was just like listen to Bag Lady with a dope beat from Andre 3000. Do it. That would be amazing.
Like Alicia,
Yeah.
Alicia's a clinical therapist, and she does She uses creative ways to incorporate yoga into where the insurance can pay for it and things like that. But I think it speaks to a much larger issue, right? That how the current system with insurance companies and whatnot reduce, what we can utilize as care because they determine how pretty much everything is paid for, and especially in like professional social work contexts and whatnot.
I think too, like I think that's one of the important values of emphasizing it as a practice is for these institutions that use this framework of the scientific method to prove efficiency and efficacy of things, right? To see how well things monitor and run. There's a necessity for consistency. So it does have to be a practice where we can at least have people say, after 2 weeks, I was able to navigate and regulate. Like for me, a lot of like breath work, things that I teach, the movement therapies, the sound retreats that we provide within our cultural context, a lot of that is like introducing people to it as like a therapeutic personal tool that they can navigate personal regulation, right? Like this is a way for you to regulate the way that you're feeling. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, Rev Love, was, I'm starting to see not only the sound, but the composition of music being important and vital. How does your relationship to sound and like our personal relationship to the instrumentation, to the music, like as a drummer, when I'm tuning my drum using a congo, I'm not trying to make my drum sound a key of C. What I'm trying to do is get the sound that comes from the drum to resonate C in my environment, right? So there's like an attunement within myself. Like I'm not trying to create C, I'm trying to create the alchemy for C with my surrounding, with that acoustic environment. So when I'm thinking about like, if I was a person in your class, like, okay, this person is creating a vibration that will help create this healing or this space within me, with the environment that I'm providing. And so then I think like, man, how vital and how powerful it is to know that it's not the outside that we're manipulating, but it's really building a relationship with our own inner frequency so that we can identify relationship health, right? Like the key of C makes me feel good, but A flat might irk me. The sound, the high pitch of that thing that's moving up and down, that's really distracting me. But a nice low tone kind of brings me more into a grounded center place. I think that awareness for people, especially in the masses, is so important with like sound healing. Like if you can really identify that certain sounds or certain frequency environments trigger certain things in you, then you can also go to like the right tone, right? The right key or the right tool to help you regulate. I think that self-regulation and self-awareness is such a big part of what you've been talking about, especially with that integrity of practice and consistency of practice. It like empowers our awareness to understand
Well, I think,
our relationship to sound. How
there's a
does
lot
your
there.
practice educate and also
One of my sound teachers
give
always
you
says that
even more of
everybody
that
has a
awareness,
home
open up your
note, a
own
home
awareness so that you
frequency.
could share it
And
the way
that's
that you do?
just the note of your heart. The best and easiest way to find that is to just hum to yourself. And you can do this. It can take weeks, months. It could take a long time or maybe a short time for you to find that note that just feels like that one is resonating most in your body. It feels like you're home. And then you can go compare that note with an instrument to tell you actually what note that is, if it's an F, if it's an A, whatever. There's definitely like sound is such a personal experience. So you could never say that like C is always a healing note for everybody. It's just never going to be that way. And there are definitely notes, especially if somebody has something like discordant in their energy field, because we're talking about how sound can move energy and move matter. That's like when it's kind of like that nails on a chalkboard. Maybe not the best comparison, but it can give people that feeling. But it's because the sound is coming up like this stagnancy in their energy field and it needs to break it up. But that can feel really uncomfortable. And these are like kind of rare happenings in sound baths, but they do happen. And then that may change. That may change next month. So it's not like that particular note is never good for you. Just maybe in that time, it was because of something discordant in your energy field. And actually that frequency was helping to clear it. So it was, even if it was kind of uncomfortable, it was actually doing you a service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of sense. And it also like makes me reflect on like the first time I actually did a yoga practice, right? Had spent years in the military and I was super strong and I thought I was going to be great at this athletic of, exercise. And man, the attunement I needed, the awareness I needed to know like my own imbalances and it was so uncomfortable and you had to kind of sit in that discomfort to like uncover what it was that you were dealing with. Like I was like, oh, my hips are out of alignment, and I couldn't come to that clarity if I didn't sit in that discomfort, which was exactly what you said. Where like there was the frequency comes up against some stagnant place, some dis-ease or some locked energy within the system, and it brings so much awareness, but there is that discipline to need to sit in it. And that's like really powerful. I think that people learn, and something that I'm learning is that you can sit with that discomfort and let it move on. Like sometimes I listen to a song and there's a part of the song I just don't like, and I'll wait it out until the chorus comes because that's my jam, is the chorus, you know? How has that been for you as like someone that leads that space? That means you deal with that probably the most, like having to sit with not only maybe your own discomfort while leading that, because maybe that tone is triggering something for you, but being able to facilitate that space and navigate that space with a crowd of people that are having individual experiences. How is it that you navigate that, and what are some of the things that guides your experience of that? Because maybe that might help some of us that are coming into those classes on how that we might be able to approach that.
So I missed the very end of your question, but I got the question, like the tools. Breath in a basic sound bath. I don't mean basic, but like in a yoga studio sound bath, I always tell people, if you come up against that, breathe. You can always open your eyes and remember that you are just laying here on a Friday evening in New York City, And it's interesting because Alice in the chat said, how did I begin my training regarding trauma-informed practitioner? And I did do a trauma-informed yoga practitioner that I would love to talk about after. But as far as sound healing goes, I mean, I got to study with a lot of great teachers who did, like John Stewart Reed, Dr. John Beaulieu, David Gibson, and they talk about like when trauma can come up through sound. So they helped me learn about that. My partner and I, big up Thug Nations for a second, big up Jifa, big up Thug Chief, who is here watching right now. Jamaica is in the internet building. My partner and I founded a sound healing program at Rikers Island in New York City. We were not prepared. Thankfully, we are very adaptable and we're very aware of like what's going on and the energy around us. So we were able to become prepared very quickly. But that was the biggest learning that I had of how to deal with trauma and sound. Because I have been to federal prisons to visit Mutulu multiple times. Not to say that federal prisons are not hell, but they're very orderly. Like, it's very organized. There are guards everywhere. You can't make a move without the guard telling you. And like, this door has to be locked before this door opens. Rikers Island is chaos. Like, I was shocked, beyond shocked. So you already have these men living in these completely chaotic, hellish situations. Rikers is falling apart. There's rats and roaches everywhere. Like it's disgusting, And they're also victims of the injustice system. More than half of the men that we came across were not mentally stable. They were all dealing with mental health challenges. And so now we're bringing our instruments in there and we're like, oh yeah, let's do some sound healing. We had to learn on the fly like crazy and give them the tools, like you're saying, teach them to just breathe. Teach them that if there's a sound that's not working, like it's really not working and you've tried to open your eyes and you've tried to breathe, just leave the room. Like that's totally valid. Maybe that sound isn't for you today. We're not here to like reopen people's trauma when they're already living in traumatic situations. So just from those experiences, then it became like a walk in the park to deal with people's trauma if it comes up in a yoga studio setting.
Yeah, when the whole time you were talking about that, I'm getting this like visceral feelings and visions of, because a prison is like the gray wasteland. It's like the exact opposite of when we're talking about healing, and it seems so intentional. Like you would think, because most people that end up in prison have, they need healing. Let's put it that way. They have life experience that means that they need healing, rather than provide some kind of access to healing environment for them, whether that's nature or sound or a variety of other things. We put them in the gray wasteland where the sounds are clanking and yelling and screaming, and the smells are usually have to do with,
I mean, I don't want to
defecting
say
and
it
things
was
like that.
difficult for us because we got to go home
I
after.
can imagine.
We were there by choice.
I mean,
and
I've done a
then we
little
left
bit of
when
work
we were
in
done.
jails and prisons, but
I mean, it was a blessing.
I can
for
imagine
us
how
to be there
difficult
to
that must have
learn.
been for you, Rev Love.
The people that we got to work with were super receptive, loved that we were there offering it, but there was a lot going on.
Challenging, I guess, would be a better word.
People that weren't taking part in the sound bath, but were in the same space, they were affected, and they'd be like, "What the F is this? Shut the F up. I need to talk to my lawyer." Or like, there was a lot going on there.
My work in when I've dealt with, whether it's writing political prisoners or even going into the jail to work with folks, I'm always taken aback by, like I think the first time I went in, I was like, these guys aren't going to want to talk to me. They're going to want, but it was the exact opposite from my experience, actually, that the folks in there wanted healing. They wanted to be sharing. They wanted the dialogue. They wanted somebody to listen to them. I guess that would be the biggest thing. They wanted somebody to listen to them, because I've been to jail, and that's one of the hardest things is they don't listen to you.
So
you really need something, you're like a non-human. They don't even acknowledge
to do like work inside those prisons. Like we're like angels on earth in a way. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to call myself an angel, or I'm not trying to put that on myself, but like we just throw those people away, our society. But these are humans, like living, breathing humans with their own experiences. We have no idea what led them to be in that position. We already know that it's a completely injustice system. So it's not even about like crime or anything like that. It's kind of a different subject, probably.
Well, I think another good topic, though, is how we can connect with people that are in prison, with human beings that are locked away in prisons. And, one of the ways is could be writing a political prisoner, or there's lots of different sites and stuff that can connect you with folks. But from my experience, just in the 10 years that I've been doing it, they've made it harder and harder and harder. Like, for example, if you write to somebody in Pennsylvania, I think they send the letter all the way to Florida, and then they make a photocopy of it. They tear it up or whatever, shred so if you had a family of like somebody and their great grandma from whenever, from way back in the day, and you mailed it to them, they would send it somewhere else to Florida. They would photocopy it, they would shred it and give them a black and white shitty copy of it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. They charge you, like if you use the email systems, it can get pricey. Every time you send a picture, it's like sending an email. It's more and more difficult, but it's something that's been extremely rewarding and a blessing for me, the connections that I've made, from Dr. Mutulu Shakur to just folks that I've met here and there. But it's also really challenging as far as, like I said, the connection. There's a lot of disruptions in the connection. A lot of times you're dealing with folks that, talking to folks that have
letters
trauma
returned because I wrote in blue ink,
other things going on, and so
accepted black ink.
It takes a real commitment, but
that,
I encourage anybody that's
I
willing.
had to start making photocopies myself of my letters, because these are long letters,
reach out to
right?
somebody.
So I would make photocopies myself and keep those photocopies, knowing that there was like a 50-50 chance that the person would get them. That's like very frequent with political prisoners, especially. One thing that Mutulu did was always connect me with other prisoners, not necessarily political prisoners, meaning like people that weren't incarcerated because of their political actions, right? People that were incarcerated because of something else. And in getting to know them, and these are people that like maybe I'll never meet in real life, but we maintained little pen pal situation just to give them some strength. And what I learned is that like every prisoner in America is a political prisoner, because it's a for-profit prison system. So even if it's not political actions that got them there, just the fact of them being incarcerated in America is political. Every incarcerated person in America is listed somewhere on a Bureau of Prisons website. You can write anybody. You know, I'm not advocating to just like pick a random name and write to somebody, but because the prison system is such a huge thing in America, I don't know anybody who doesn't know somebody who's been incarcerated or is currently incarcerated. Write somebody. It doesn't matter what they're there for. It doesn't matter if it's because they're a revolutionary or not. Like, write that person. That is their only lifeline to the outside. Like I said, these are like forgotten members of society. Like, it'll change their life, and I can guarantee it'll also change your life.
Yeah, and you might get some very thoughtful letters back to you that don't exist out here in this world today. People don't like writing letters and, you know, taking the time out to do something like that. And, you know, a lot of the relationships I've developed are some of the most meaningful interactions and conversations that I have through, you know, handwritten letters. And, you know, you spoke about Dr. Mutulu Shakur again, and it's funny because I've talked to several other prisoners that reference him as somebody they had come across. Delbert Africa always spoke very highly of Mutulu. I had me and my wife connected with this other Jamaican guy in, the large mega prison in Colorado named Delroy. He talked about how he came in contact with Mutulu Shakur and just really helped him and uplifted him and mentored him. And so there's a lot of work going on behind bars and organizing in a way that's kind of stopped out here in the outside world. I was wondering what your thoughts are on, you know, how we move forward in these kind of organizing and activism, because I've been over the years reading a lot of stuff on the FBI and the CIA, and it's honestly really discouraging because I see the methods that are used. And I mean, we talked about this before, but even if you held some kind of protest or resistance movement, all it takes is somebody that wants to disrupt it to send in an outside agitator to make you look really bad and to blow the whole thing up. I know we talked a lot about the CIA and stuff the last time that we spoke, but, you know, how do we move forward and still make a difference? And, you know, we talked a lot about revolutionizing the self, but how do we take that out where it's now and make a difference? And even if, you know, somebody was talking about, Jesse said revolutionizing healthcare, but, you know, how do we create revolution within the systems in the outside world? It seems almost so devastating when I think about it sometimes, and I keep reading about the tactics used, you know, because the CIA and the FBI, for example, have had, you know, almost a whole century at this point
I think, like,
to develop
one
the
piece of
tactics
our
that they
work
use.
as healers is to maintain.
So to me,
that
sometimes
hope,
it could be discouraging. I
because
should still try to find hope in certain
in
ways,
itself
but I
is
think
like
it's
a
going to have to change some way or another.
act, because they want us to be hopeless. And it's really easy to look around at the world and feel like it's hopeless because it's terrible out there, you know? Our joy is an act of resistance because they don't want us to experience that, you know? I think ultimately, like, there are a variety of tactics is the best way to go about any kind of change. So I'm not a proponent of like only one tactic or only one way is what's going to revolutionize the world. At my heart, I'm an anarchist, so I would love to just create all our own systems and not have to use any of Babylon's systems at all, because we're totally independent as a people. We have our own healthcare, we have our own education system, we grow our own food. We know how to run some kind of justice system to keep people accountable for things in society. I think we're quite a ways away from that happening, but I do think that the people creating our own systems is the only way. I think the people need to create their own systems. And I don't believe in reforming the system that exists already, because it's not a system that's built on equal rights and justice. It's a system built to oppress. I don't believe in reform. I don't believe in reforming the system that's currently there. I believe that the people need to create all our own systems: education, healthcare, a justice system, growing our own food. Like, we need to be accountable and in charge of all of our own shit, because the system that exists wasn't built on equal rights and justice. It was built to oppress people, right? It was built to only benefit a few at the detriment of the many. So I don't think that system is even worth trying to reform. I think that's a waste of our time and resources, and that what we should be putting our time and resources in is building our own systems.
And I think we're seeing more and more of it. I mean, it becomes harder and harder in some ways, but you see more and more people that are thinking and talking in such a way, from like students that I'm working with, you know, Alice in the chat. And so there's a lot of hope for change out there, and there's a lot of people organizing. And I think we connected in Hawaii, and that's one place that you see a lot of that kind of movement, revolutionary movement going on.
Yeah. You know, I really enjoyed your articulation about sound healing and yoga practice, what it kept bringing up for me was kind of like a tapping in, an attunement, a return to authenticity. You know, like when you were talking about being in the prisons, I've only been able to work with the adult population once. Before that, it was young children. And we talk a lot about narrative. We talk a lot about what are the stories that we're telling. Well, a big part of that story is how we're using our breath to form sound, to articulate meaning, and then to share that with other people. And if we never have the time to regulate and allow ourselves to connect to that authentic tone, like you said, like it may be an ohm, like being able to enunciate and put that sound together and to have that agency to create your own sound, to know what that is, and to when you hear it in the world too, to be able to recognize like, oh, that's my vibe. You know, that's the thing that regulates with me or that co-creates with me. I really enjoyed how much of your conversation kept leading us back to the breath, and it kept making me think about my words. It kept making me think about how is breath and sound related to me, right? And the words that you said, they and the tone that you do it, right? Like me being a man, when I'm in relationship, a lot of times I'm criticized for my tone, right? Because there's an accompaniment, there's an alchemy to aligning the tone with the articulation, and that creates an energetic bond with other people. And so even being aware and attuned to what my own frequency is, and you know, like you've really encouraged me to jump into more of these sound modalities and frequency modalities just for the personal exploration of like, what's my authentic sound? Like, I can't wait to get my ohm down, you know, where I'm in there and like I'm with a whole bunch group of monks and stuff. And I'm like, y'all can't wait to hear my ohm. Wait till you hear my ohm, homie. It's going to be, you know, like there's something about the way you articulated that made me kept internally investigating what is my authentic frequency, what is my authentic sound, what is that, like you said, what is my voice, where is that authentic voice? Before I know what my voice is, I want to know what key I'm in. I want to know what, you know, like I have a deep voice, and so when I lived in Asia, I would always have to elevate my voice like this and talk a little softer like this because my normal waking up voice is this, and this scares half of the population because they're not used to deep registers and things like that. So I had to like know and become aware of what's my normal tone and how can I adjust, how can I modify, how can I be true to what I'm saying and what I want to express, but make it palatable for the person I want to receive it, or even receive their tones as something that's comfortable for me. And so I really enjoyed the way you articulated the practice, the practical aspects, and the personal relationship of sound healing, because it made it seem really investigatory. It made it sound like a place of curiosity where I could find the sounds and the tones that bring me healing, bring me restoration, and that also bring me authenticity. So I really enjoyed just like your application and your perspective, your vantage point on it, because it's not something that I hear a lot in the sound healing and the vibrational healing, frequency healing world. You know, we're very like, we love being aloof, but to have the practicality, the consistency, and the authenticity as the main focus was really refreshing and really enjoyable for me. So Rev Love, I appreciate your perspective and integrity in that.
Yeah, it's like Ace was saying, you know, if you can just connect with your breath at times, that makes such a big difference in your day, especially in challenging moments. And we're talking about like incarcerated populations. We're talking about the whole world, but incarcerated populations, like, or people that live in chaotic places in general, we're like always in the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight. And like every like medical document shows that like constantly being in the fight or flight, this affects the whole system, the whole body, which can lead to disease. We can change that, shift it by just breath or just humming to yourself. So in incarcerated populations, like it's like that's such an easy thing that we can show people, you know, just connect with your breath for a minute. hum that tone that you like. Nobody even has to hear you, just like, you know.
That's awesome. We're gonna go humming today. So we're gonna go down the street humming and skipping. We're gonna do it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
What's really super interesting, and I always say that because of this, my younger sister was like my first sound healing teacher. She was diagnosed with leukemia when she was 3. And this was like in the 90s. So she went through the whole chemotherapy. She got radiation to her brain. Traumatized child. She went through it, you know? She got over it. She's still alive. Like, alhamdulillah, thank God, you know? But when she was going through that, her body was experiencing a lot of pain. And she would hum all the time, like very loud. Just, it was driving my parents crazy. Nobody could understand why she was doing it until one doctor, who was a little bit more of an enlightened doctor, was like, she's healing her pain. Like, she's soothing her pain with that humming, because the sound vibrations are soothing the pain in her body. And all these years later, I learned that that is like scientifically correct. And she just knew as a 7-year-old innately that that was what was going to help her get through this terrible situation.
Oh, that makes me think of like our moms holding us and like, you know, humming those moments. Like, wow. Yeah. And you said it in the beginning, right? Like even when we're in the womb, like the way that that sound sets the tone, sets the environment for what we're experiencing. Wow, that's so powerful, right? That even the doctor then would just say, yeah, no, that soothing frequency is getting rid of her pain. And yeah, that again, right? Like how it can irritate some, you know, like, but it could be healing for others. The grace that the entire family like experience in that attunement and that adjustment and in that healing process, like it brought up so much for everyone. That is awesome. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. Come on, Sound Healing. Let's go.
I wanted to say to Monica's comment too. She said, talking about earlier when we were talking about making change and everything, people get upset about what's happening, but so few of them are thinking of what to do to move forward. And I think for a lot of us, it can feel like we're looking for somebody else or another group to lead the way for us, but sometimes we don't always have that. And I've become a believer, even with what we're doing here with revolutionary social work, is that you make that road by walking it. And if you walk that path, then other people will find you and they'll see that you're walking, come, and they'll gather around you, you know. And I think that speaks to even just how I know Rev Love, how I know you, how I know everybody in here, and things like that. So I think it can be hard when we feel like we don't have somewhere to go, or that everybody else is doing the opposite. But again, we have to make that road by walking that path, by, you know, trailblazing that path sometimes ourselves, and then other people will see it, and then they'll feel liberated to be able to do the same and follow you and join us.
That's like one of the things of this time though, right? Like in this time of Great Awakening, is the kind of leader follower paradigm is falling away, and we all are being called to be leaders in our own way now. We're all being called to just get on that path and do it. It's not about like looking to a guru or looking to a master anymore to provide those answers to us. Like we all have to find those answers within, or from studying whatever it is, and just proceed forward without somebody explicitly telling us like, this is what we need to do as a people. That's kind of shifting in this time.
Yeah, and look at, even if we look back at like the Dr. Mutulu Shakur or Huey Newton or Fred Hampton or the, you know, the young lords, they were in their 20s making change. They weren't looking for somebody else to do it. They were doing it in their early 20s. And I think we've fallen into this thing where oftentimes the youth is, you know, operating too much like infants instead of, you know, taking upon that revolutionary change on their own, which they have the power to do. And I think we actually talked quite a bit about that last time, Rev Love, about the younger generation, how it's taken longer, you know, to get that maturity to act upon those such things.
Yeah, for sure. I look at like Malcolm was 40 when he was murdered, and I'm like, look how much he accomplished. 40 years. You know, Fred Hampton was 21 years old. Like, it's like, that is crazy. Tupac was like,
I challenge everybody, go just pull up Fred Hampton and just listen to a couple of videos of him talking, and he does not sound like somebody that's 20, 21 years old.
Yeah.
In today's
and even Pac, right? Pac was 20. How old was Pac?
25.
27? 25? Yeah. We got work to do, but you know, we're doing it.
When we talk about, whenever we were talking about Tupac earlier, one of the things that makes me the saddest is that he never had the chance to mature even further, to kind of let loose, let go of some of the things, and just develop his consciousness even more, because his potential was.
Yeah, I see people on Instagram actually talk about it a lot. Like, how would Pac feel about this? Like, what would Pac be doing during this time? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of it's hard.
Well, I think it's time we wrap it up and move forward. It's been a pleasure again, Rev Love, and I hope we can continue to connect. I hope that Alicia and I can make it out there to New York at some point and connect in person. And just know that you're always welcome to come visit us in Hawaii as well.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, definitely. We need to continue this. We always need to continue the conversation. We always have like so much more to build on. I'm just grateful for these spaces that we can share some ideas and just put a little more positive energy out in the world at these times.
Well, I wanted to say it's been a pleasure to meet you, and thank you so much for sharing your wealth of experience and diversity of experience too. It was really nice to hear your focus in this work that you're doing. Is really, really nice. It was very refreshing. So thanks for the conversation. Thanks for teaching me a lot today. I appreciate it.
Thank you to both of you. Yeah, Jerome, so nice to meet you, and each one teach one, right, my friends?
Yeah.
And thanks to everybody in the audience that tuned in. And, Rev Love, thanks for epitomizing revolutionary social work. That's what it's all about. And I appreciate you and everything that you do and who you are.
Yeah, appreciate love y'all too. Yeah. Revolutionary love.
All right. Peace. Have a great day.
Peace.
Yeah,
everybody.
you too.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.